Hi, this is Asa. I've had the privilege of playing the Ascent a few days ahead of the official release. And look, to cut a long story incredibly short, I've really enjoyed my time with it. For those of you looking for a bit more insight, please stick around. I've got plenty more to say. Let's get into it. The Ascent is the first game from Neon Giant. They're a 12-person team operating in Sweden and, in their own words, a small game dev studio with the belief that with the right focus and mindset, even just a few people can create grand experiences and high-quality games. The Ascent is their Exhibit A. It's their first release and it's available on Xbox One, Xbox Series consoles and PC. I've been able to play the game briefly on all of those platforms and we'll take a look at them a bit closer later on. It retails for $30 or euros or £25. Oh, and did I mention that the game is available day one on Xbox Game Pass? You love it. Let's take a look at what the game is. I'm going to borrow Neon Giant's own words again to introduce it. The Ascent is a solo and co-op action shooter RPG set on Velez, a packed cyberpunk world. Welcome to the Ascent Group Arcology, a corporate-run metropolis stretching high into the sky and filled with creatures from all over the galaxy. You play as a worker enslaved by the company that owns you and everyone else in your district. One day you are suddenly caught in a vortex of catastrophic events. The Ascent Group shuts down for unknown reasons, and the survival of your district is threatened. You must take up arms and embark on a new mission to find out what started it all. Right, let's get into some gameplay. You'll start off creating your indentured character. The options here are fairly rudimentary, with the most important selections being the primary and secondary colours, as these will persist across every bit of armour that you equip throughout the game. The primary colour also determines a few elements of the interface as well, so if you select red, like Colt Eastwood here, then in co-op you'll be fairly hard to distinguish from hostiles on the radar. You do get to see your character close up in conversational cutscenes and the like as you play through the game. Those are rendered in real time, so if you're playing in co-op you can look for opportunities to cutscene bomb your friends during key story beats. You'll unlock some additional customization options as you play through the game, and you can visit a grifter in Velez to change everything, so you can jump into the game pretty quickly from here. Now let's get into the good stuff, the action. The left stick moves your character, the right stick allows you to aim independently, the right trigger fires your gun, X will reload, and the A button performs a satisfyingly quick evasive roll. As you progress through the opening areas, you'll get access to a secondary weapon that you can swap to using the Y button. You get a tactical ordnance ability by clicking the left stick, and a nice variety of augments like a seismic slam, a self-heal, or bullet time that you can activate with the left or right bumpers. You've also got crouch on the B button and aim high on the left trigger, and I've left those two till last for a good reason. Enemies appear with a frequent and fairly regular cadence as you make your way through the combat areas, and when they do appear they almost always emerge from all sides, cutting off any retreat. The game initially favours a run and gun approach, as you might expect from the twin stick scheme, keeping your distance from melee enemies, watching your back, and rounding them up for the slaughter. The run and gun approach has its place throughout the game, but Neon Giant's approach to gunfights is perhaps less common. This isn't a bullet hell game. Instead, the crouch and aim high actions that I mentioned earlier give you the capacity to make use of cover. You can crouch behind low cover and raise your gun to fire over the top of it, and you can expect your enemies to use that same method against you. For me, the cover system initially felt slightly more clunky to execute. My instinct cried out to run and gun, but the enemies that you face are no pushovers, and I died about 10 times in the space of a few hours. At this point I still favour running and gunning, but ducking into some cover when the situation demands it has become second nature. Mind you, I still die quite a bit. Fortunately for me, death is not massively punishing, it just sets you back a short way, and you try again, and I haven't felt any frustration from that. I'm sure you've also noticed that the game uses an isometric camera, and that it follows your movements. You can't rotate it at all, but it isn't completely static either. It pans in and out to reveal some of the more dramatic backdrops and really ensure that the player takes in the scope, beauty and grime of the fictional city of Velez. Velez is brilliant, by the way. It's an incredible realisation of a cyberpunk dystopia. The sprawling, densely populated, maze-like city is the game's crowning achievement. My journey so far has taken me through packed neon streets, derelict flooded suburbs, the straining mechanical underbelly of it all, and sterile research facilities and way more as well. The soundtrack is brilliant and fits the mood perfectly at all times, and the denizens of Veles seal the deal, with interesting characters and high quality voice acting, really bringing the world and the story to life. I will say that some of the mature language perhaps feels a little bit forced at times, but I've met some colourful characters and run some well designed errands along the way. Neon Giant say that the game offers 10 to 15 hours of gameplay for the core missions and 15 to 20 hours for a full run, including all of the side quests. I'd absolutely recommend playing the side quests, partly to give yourself the best chance of surviving the core missions, but mostly because the side quests that I've seen have been well crafted, telling stories of their own. There is one fetch quest in there that seems to exist purely to poke fun at fetch quests. It's a task to collect potent feral testicles. But otherwise the side quests have all been really nicely contained stories that take you to fresh locations that you're going to want to see. See and wreck. Veles has a satisfyingly destructible skin to it, and most of your weapons are, well, they're not subtle. Explosive barrels litter the combat areas, and if you're short of those you can blow up vehicles as well. Hell, with the right augments, you can turn your enemies into damaging explosives. Combat sees rubble and guts flying everywhere, and while you aren't going to be levelling the city or creating new pathways through it, the wanton carnage certainly contributes a lot to the game's visual flair. Most of the footage in this video has been taken from the Xbox Series X version of the game, but I did spend a bit of time with every other version as well. So let's run through the performance profiles on offer. It's worth reiterating that this is a pre-release build and we know there's a day one patch coming, so don't take this as a performance analysis. But I think it's still worth seeing what the different platforms have to offer. The Series X delivers a 4K resolution and 60 frames per second. Performance was solid for the majority of my playthrough, but the performance definitely dipped in a couple of particularly packed scenes. I didn't sample 4-player co-op, so I can't say for sure how well it holds up when the stuff of that magnitude hits the fan, but don't be surprised if the frame rate isn't perfectly locked throughout. The Xbox Series S delivers an impressive 1440p at 60 frames per second, and you can see how well it holds up here. It's actually fairly difficult to distinguish from the Series X version. It's running just as smoothly and packing all of the explosions and effects. I was seriously impressed by the brief time that I spent with this version. Series S owners are in for a treat. The Xbox One X rocks up with a 4K resolution but cuts the frame rate down to 30. Going straight into it from one of the superior 60 frames versions is really quite jarring, but if you're jumping straight into it from other 30 frames per second games, it might be more palatable. It also significantly increases load times and introduces some more hitching as you move around Veles. Most of the destructive layer still crumbles nicely, but the explosions seem a little bit thinner, and some of the effects seem to be stripped out completely, including the damaging shockwaves that are supposed to appear as these big lugs smash the floor with their hammer. Veles still looks great here, nothing about its atmosphere is lost, but you can kind of feel through the controller that it's a definite step down from both of the series consoles. And of course the Xbox One sits at the bottom of the pile with a 900p resolution and 30 frames per second. Neon Giant have landed on the performance profile that a lot of big games end up with on this hardware, so it's no slight on them. But on a big screen it does look noticeably blurry, and the console definitely struggles to keep the action flowing smoothly. Still, I was impressed to see effects like screen space reflections and global illumination are still intact, and the environments are still captivating here. The PC version of the game packs some extra bells and whistles over the Series X version. Effects and post-processing can be kicked up a notch if you have the hardware for it. In fact, if you have high-end RTX hardware from Nvidia, you can enable a suite of ray tracing effects on top of that. Unfortunately, those settings weren't working in the preview build of the game, so I can't tell you about that just yet. PC players might also be wondering how the game fares with a keyboard and mouse. And I'm happy to report that causing mayhem with the clicks of a mouse feels every bit as satisfying. W, A, S and D are used to move, and you can aim using the mouse. The aiming is based on the orientation of the character, so rather than having to directly click on your targets, and it essentially feels like a direct equivalent of the controller, rather than a whole different way to play the game. A final note on the PC version: if you want to squad up with your friends on the Xbox, then you'll need to pick the game up on the Windows Store or play through Xbox Game Pass to play across those platforms. If your friends are playing on Steam, then you'll need to pick up the Steam version. Steam is not included in the cross-platform pool. That's all I've got to say in this video. I hope you found it informative or just enjoyed hearing my perspective. I've really enjoyed the game. We'll be having a chat with the team at Neon Giant in the near future, so if you have any questions for them, you can pop those in the comments here. I assume this probably isn't your first time on YouTube, but just in case, I'll ask you to kindly hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. That stuff really does help us. I'm Asa. You can find me at Gameondaily.com, and I'm on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube as Asa_Gameondaily. Thanks for watching.